Well, hello everybody. This live session today is about science and it's about art and it's about a woman who's made it possible to speak about these vastly different subjects in the same sentence. So we have Priyanka Das Rajkakati joining us today. She's an aerospace engineer and who's obviously really passionate about space. She's an artist too, and we are surely someday going to see her travel to Mars or Moon very soon. She's already had a rehearsal of sorts right here on Earth itself. Here's a brief introduction about Priyanka. She's a PhD in Global Navigation Satellite Systems Technology at Safran and ISAE-Supaéro. She is, like I told you, extremely passionate about space. She's also an artist. She wants to build bases on the moon and Mars and maybe even go there someday. She's an artist. She's going to have her artwork being taken to the moon I think in 2022. She's taken part in a lunar analog-astronaut mission as a commander in training. She's also actively involved in STEM outreach as an ambassador for L'Oreal UNESCO for Girls in Space program. And she's clearly living her dream. Welcome, Priyanka. Can you give us a brief idea of heard this extensive bio of yours, but what is it that you exactly do?
So my whole life, I've tried to not stick to stereotypes. And as you know, like DIPAVALI and I have grown up together in the same school. And as you know me, I have always been as passionate about science as I've been about art. And I tried to become, I did physics in my bachelor's degree, and that's when I started realizing that I was really missing art. And I thought, why not mix the two together? There are so many people who are actually, exploring the boundaries between art and science. And I wanted to give it the extra edge by putting in my passion for space in this dialogue between art and science. So for the space part, I'm currently doing a PhD in aerospace. I also have a degree in aerospace engineering. But I also work with some projects with the European Space Agency as an artist and trying to explore the boundaries of art. Yeah.
Can you tell me more about that? How do you manage to overlap space and art?
So I work with this organization called ILUEG, International Lunar Exploration Working Group. It was set up by various space agencies like NASA, ESA, and a few others who got together to ESA is European Space Agency. It's not as famous as NASA, I know.
No acronyms, please.
Okay. Yeah. But NASA everyone knows. So all these space agencies got together and they created this platform called International Lunar Exploration Working Group. So lunar and exploration. Lunar obviously means there's space science involved, but when you say space, people tend to associate space with just rocket science. But the second part, exploration, means you're one day looking at setting colonies in these, that's human nature, just exploring and going to different places. And it's only natural that we one day go from Earth to different planets. So the part exploration is what people tend to forget, that exploration doesn't just mean sending scientists out to space. They're human beings. And what is one thing that's intrinsic to human nature? It's culture, right?
Right.
So dance, art, music, sports as well. So the aim of ILUEG is to see how culture is important and what are the new kinds of, how can we push the boundaries of culture to in spatial in an extraterrestrial context, and how to also create, say, lunar villages tomorrow that are not just bases built for scientists, but are also taking into account the need for entertainment, the need for having more cultural activities on board, so that the humans over there don't go crazy and start killing each other. So.
True. I know. When you talk about going crazy, let me ask you this first. You participated in a lunar analog mission as a commander in training. So firstly, where did you go? How did you get selected? And what was that experience like? And then I have a follow-up question. When you say, humans, this is isolation, this is confinement, right?
Yeah.
Talk about that aspect of it.
Yeah. So it's through my involvement with ILUEG, International Lunar Exploration Working Group, where they have this sub-program called Euromoon Mars. Euromoon Mars is a set of campaigns, analog campaigns. Analog is basically simulation of extraterrestrial environments. So on Earth, there are a few areas that sort of simulate extraterrestrial environments, like the volcano Mauna Loa in Hawaii, which kind of looks like the lunar surface. There are there's a desert in Utah called, okay, I don't know the exact name of the desert, but there's another analog mission there. There is one also in the Middle Eastern countries. So all these places that, also Antarctica obviously, but all these places that kind of look extraterrestrial, where you don't really have people living there, are converted into bases and analog bases. And there's one at Hawaii called HISEAS, so Hawaii Space Exploration and Analog Simulation.
Okay.
It's a recent base. It was set up, I think, in 2018, and since then
Okay.
they've been launching many analog missions. And Euromoon Mars, with which I work,
I see.
they had many missions planned. So I was part of the third mission, and they
Oh.
selected me for this.
Then, yeah, can you tell me about your experience there?
So my role there, I had three roles. So first role was obviously commander in training. So I trained under the director of HISEAS, Mikhaila Musilova. She was the commander during our mission, and she trained me for a week about how to be a commander, what are the duties involved. And so it was a 2-week mission. And the second week, I sort of took over command, and I was trying my hand out as a commander of the mission. It was really cool. Your interaction with people completely changes. You work a bit on your leadership qualities. You learn when to be nice, when to be a bit forceful,
Yeah.
coercive, I would say,
I
for
see.
the good of the team. And so that was my first role. The second role was as the artist on board. So I was doing a lot of art experiments. Once again, art experiments for the same group, Euromoon Mars. And the third was I was helping out as in some of the science experiments, in geological experiments, in navigation and robotics. Yeah.
Can you tell me a bit more about the art experiments? Like, it's so intriguing when you talk about science and art together like that.
Yeah. So a personal part, a research that I'm doing is to understand this gray zone between art and science. So for me, yeah, if you just talk about painting or art, yeah, it might seem very abstract and very far removed from science, which is very pragmatic, very practical, very application based. But if you take art a bit towards science, just to create music, I mean, you depend a lot on technology.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
same with art, even new media that you explore for creating art, it requires a lot of technology.
Yes.
And on the other hand, you can use scientific equations for creating art, something very beautiful, something very aesthetic. I mean, art doesn't necessarily have to be very beautiful. But
Correct. Yeah.
for me, I try to explore this gray region between art and science. So science that uses art and art that uses a lot of technology. And based on this, there is a program called the Moon Gallery Project, sponsored by the European Space Agency. And the idea is, for me, it was really cool when they told me about it. It's to send artwork to the moon in 2022.
Yeah.
So I was fortunate to be one of the artists selected for this Moon Gallery project. And to give you a background of what it means to send artwork to the moon, to send anything to the moon, it costs 1 million euros per kilogram.
Okay.
Kilogram of anything. So you
Okay.
cannot send something very heavy, right? You cannot send a huge painting.
Yeah.
So what scientists and artists behind this project did, they miniaturized the gallery. So it's basically 10 into 10 centimeters, divided into 100, so about 1 centimeter cube. So 100 of these tiny cubic
Okay.
centimetric spaces that have been allocated to different artists. And so the challenge is to fit artwork that fits into these cubes.
I see.
So
Wow.
at High Seas, where I was doing the analog mission, so half the gallery is already filled, and so I was showcasing this gallery there on the lunar surface. And on one hand, yes, the experiment with this part was to like just take pictures of the gallery in a lunar sort of environment. But there were a lot of experiments, human factors experiments. Like one of the artists, she proposed a perfume that kind of reminds the astronaut of Earth. So she used very urban tones like
Wow.
soil,
Okay.
different flowers. So one of the experiments was in confinement. So 2 weeks of confinement, where there were six of us in that small, tiny space in the habitat. Away, we didn't see anyone else during those 2 weeks, and internet was limited, so we didn't even have like real-time face call video calls.
Right.
So in such confined situations, if you smell that perfume, like what kind of reactions does it, what
Yes.
kind does it invoke in you? So those kind of psychological experiments were being done using artwork as a base. I was
That's
also
amazing.
an artist, so I was drawing a lot of,
Uh-huh.
I was painting a lot based on my experience
Great.
at High Seas, which I would show during an exhibition later this year.
Wow.
And
That's really, it sounds incredible. I want to just move a little slightly off to the other aspect of it, which is the isolation and confinement that you were talking
yeah,
about, how you can be driven crazy by it. Astronauts have experience of that, and you went on an analog mission, also got to experience it.
yeah,
I think this was in January, you went on this mission, isn't it?
2020, yeah.
And
Yeah,
once that happened, the world kind of changed, and like the rest of the world also went into
yeah.
confinement. So, did you draw from your experience there to face what happened next?
So yeah, I want to congratulate everyone here on having successfully completed a confinement mission at their homes. And I would say the two are very different. Being in confinement during a space mission or even an analog mission, when you know the duration during which you're going to be confined, is
Right.
psychologically very different from being confined at home for you don't know how long. But yeah, for sure, psychologically, I knew I had already done a confinement mission. I knew that how to survive one, which is basically have something to do all the time, have structured day, have goals set for the day, not just your own work, but also entertainment is very important. So, for example, during our confinement over there, we every day we would make the schedule for the day, the previous day,
Okay.
and we would plan out. Morning is allocated for this kind of scientific work, evening for this, and after you send your reports, which had to be done daily, night time was we would just relax, watch a movie, play games together, and it
Okay.
was like a crew bonding sort of thing.
Wow. Amazing.
So I used that during my confinement experiment, not experiment, the true confinement that everyone lived.
Right.
Yeah. So it was kind
Okay.
of useful, I would say. Yeah.
I see. So, Priyanka, before I come to personal questions about you, and you've done, I mean, we've already learned about some of the really interesting things you've done. But of course, I want to come to how you started from you were a student in India, you're from Assam, and going to France and all the way to space. I mean, we can say that you've been to space. Before that, I wanted to do this session a few days ago when the Apollo landing anniversary happened. And so I want to know you, Priyanka, that we are finally thinking of sending women astronauts to the moon. They've already been to space, but this is the first time they're going to land on the moon. So why did it take so long?
So firstly, there's a very interesting article that I read, which was to escape Earth, to go to the moon, men have to escape Earth's gravitational field, but women have to escape the gender bias, you know. And there are many reasons why women have not been to the moon, at least. I don't know if there have been secret missions because humans are crazy. But so far, officially, there have been no women on the moon. And that's because, I mean, if you look at it, all the human moon missions have been planned by NASA. And they were in the so 1969 was the first mission
Yeah.
where people actually landed on the moon, but
Yeah.
Apollo 11. But there have been other missions before them where they took a round trip around the moon and came back,
Yeah.
like Apollo 8, for example, which is the one which took that famous photo called Earthrise, the Earth rising from the moon. Beautiful photo.
Yeah.
But all these missions, they lasted from in the 1960s to the 1970s, and they were all men. And at the time, women were not even considered as
Yeah.
astronaut material, you know. And the first American female astronaut, Sally Ride, actually went to space in 1983. By then, the moon missions had already been defunded, like there was no more funding. And to send anyone to the moon, you need a lot of funding. And I
Yeah.
think it's the sending anyone to the moon is not so much a technological problem, but not so much technological or scientific as it is political and funding based.
True.
So
Yeah.
now, yeah, so this time again, perhaps because of political backing, NASA has taken the step forward to send to do fresh missions to the moon in 2024, and this time send a woman on the moon. And so it's called the Artemis mission, and it's interesting because Artemis was the twin sister of Apollo. So
Yes. Yeah.
that's the play behind the word why it's called Artemis. Yeah.
Artemis is the goddess of the moon. I mean, I would say like the first mission should have been called Artemis and not Apollo.
Yeah, but you know, there are so many anecdotes we can talk about women in space and the discrimination that's being faced, which is also one of the events I'm organizing with a fabulous team from this organization called Space Generation Advisory Council. So the SGAC, it's an organization for young professionals and students in space between 18 and 35 years of age. So if anyone in the audience is interested, inscription is free. You can just join the organization. And with them, we are hosting this event for talking about women in space. Not so much how to encourage women to join the space domain, because that's easy, just give. I mean, everyone is fascinated by space. But once a woman joins the space industry, how do you maintain her passion? How do you maintain her? How do you make it sustainable for her as a career choice? Because a lot of women join and they leave after 5 years because they're not able to progress or they're being discriminated against.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Really?
So our event is to discuss these
Mhm.
kind of issues. Yeah.
Okay. I was going to ask you that. Like, do you think space has become more inclusive now? I mean, what's your experience?
I have asked this question to a lot of senior officials in space, and they've said that, yeah, from the 70s, there's like a huge amount of difference. But that doesn't mean that there isn't room for improvement, room for drastic improvement.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, but I think our generation per se, at least, is seeing a lot of opportunities. But then again, it's not so much about enticing the young people to join, but how to give them the motivation to stay in the space industry in their 40s, in their 50s, in their 60s, you know.
Okay.
So I think that is where the change needs to come. Yeah.
I see. I see. Priyanka, right now, I would like to move this to a different track. It's more personal to you. Can you tell us why what made you decide that this is where you want to be? You've always been passionate about space. I remember you had this dilemma about choosing between art and science, and I'm so glad that after 10 years you found an overlap between the two. So, can you tell me about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, after school, I did apply to NID, National Institute of Design in Ahmedabad. Uh, I was fortunate to have gotten in, but then once I was there, I realized that I think design is something I could continue doing in my life, but to do science, you need to have a base. You need to have the fundamentals, the math, the physics. So that is something which would be hard to get later on. So that's why I decided to leave my seat at NID, which I sometimes still regret, and join St. Stephen's College in Delhi University for doing physics. A decision I don't really regret, finally. And but once I was doing my physics course, I started feeling weird. I was like, yeah, I'm good at this. I like doing it, and but I kept shifting towards projects that involved a lot of art, to the point where one of my professors, Dr. Vikram Fukan, he was like, you're a very artistic person. Maybe you should pursue something that is multidisciplinary instead of just going for a master's in physics then doing a PhD. So he encouraged me to apply to École Polytechnique in France, which is like it says, polytechnique, so lots of disciplines. I know that in India, polytechnique doesn't seem to have a big worth, but the school is
Yeah.
pretty amazing in France. It's where most of the French names that you see in when you're studying physics, they're from this particular school. So like I felt amazed to be breathing the same air as Mandelbrot did once, or Curie, or Vio, and Poiseuille. Yeah, it's Poiseuille and not Poiseuille.
Yeah,
That was
I know.
funny coming and
Mispronouncing that
learning the yeah,
all
yeah,
our
yeah.
life.
It was funny to and also because I wanted to continue in exploring a bit more. I didn't want to just give myself a well-defined, like, because I mean my parents are pretty open-minded, and I'm really grateful for that. They didn't force me into doing one particular thing, but there was always this little thing, look for a stable job, look for this, look for that. So
Okay.
I wanted to be in my own space where I would be able to chart my own future without being, coerced into anything. So I thought moving abroad was a good idea, and that's how I
Yeah.
ended up in France. And yeah,
So, when you started out, did you have any idea how this was possible? Who was your biggest mentor
no.
in this direction?
So I this was actually in 2018 when I went to this space conference called International Astronautical Conference. Congress, sorry, IAC. It's like the biggest platform where everyone, the who's who of space, meets every year to to present their ideas to. So I thought it was going to be a very technical conference, and what I it was the universe coordinating to put me in the right direction. I was standing in front of a door, and I was looking at the door, and I was like, something is drawing me inside, and then I looked at the piece of paper which gave a description of what's happening inside. It said art in space, and I was like, what? And I
Wow.
went in, and I would say it was kind of that one of those moments in life which kind of diverge, make you diverge from your path. And I went there. I talked to these artists who've been doing space projects. Including a chief scientist at the European Space Agency called Bernard Foy, who's kind of been like a mentor to me ever since. And he was one of the top scientists at ESA. He was a project lead of the first European mission to the moon. And but he's also an artist, and
Oh, wow.
he has been backing a lot of these art projects in space. So, and he's also
Amazing.
the head of the International Lunar Exploration Working Group, which I talked about at the beginning. So everything is a loop, you know,
I know.
the space world. It's one of my favorite quotes that the universe of space is really small. Like you see the same people everywhere, including space artists, and through this conference I was put in touch with many different people and a lot of people who are actually doing a lot of creative work in space, and that's when I
Hmm.
realized that wow, this is actually possible, you know.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
so
That
I
was
started being more involved with, yeah.
uh-huh. No, that's just it's a serendipitous discovery. It's like that was
Yeah,
meant
yeah,
to
yeah. It
happen.
was completely, yeah. And I wasn't even presenting a paper or anything at the conference at that time. I just went
Okay.
because I was curious about it, and it was
Mhm.
not so far from where I was staying. So,
Ah.
and yeah, I would say that a lot of things in our lives is based on chance, and
Mhm.
the only favor you can do yourself is to make sure that you try out as many things as you can in order to find those chances. So,
Amazing. I
yeah.
like that thought. Priyanka, what would be your advice to young girls in STEM?
Do not give up. Try different. Apart from that, I would say I was very lucky that I had very supportive parents. So it for me, I would say the biggest hurdle today, at least in India, is getting out of this little shell that women are supposed to stay under for their own safety reasons, for whatever reasons. So I would say do not hesitate to reach out to people and find out their life stories, because my life story need not be the same as someone else's. The opportunities I got need not be the same as someone else's. But there are so many opportunities right now that you
Hmm.
have to go out there and be informed, go even if you're really tired, and don't stay in bed, walk out to that seminar and talk to people. I think that's, and show that you're interested,
Hmm.
and go prepared, go with your questions. Don't just be like, oh, I'm interested in space, get me a job. Like, no. What have you done so far? So learn. I mean, the internet gives you so many opportunities to learn,
Yeah.
to do free online courses, especially during the times of COVID. So read up, try to figure out what's your interest, talk to more people. Yeah. Network.
Yeah, networking is important, of course. So,
Yeah.
it's been an absolute pleasure learning about your journey and talking to you. I mean, I'm sure we can go on and on because you've done so much, but we have limited time. So, I mean, it's been
Yeah.
catching up with you and also listening to your story in detail. Many of the things I didn't know before. It's great to see you living your dreams. You're truly a role model for girls in science. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks, Pavli, for
Thank
this
you so
opportunity.
much.
Yeah.